The dust swirled around Adelaide Kendrick's worn boots as she stood frozen in the doorway of the mercantile, her cheeks burning hotter than the August sun beating down on Silver Reef, Utah. While every person in the store turned to stare at the woman whose husband had died 6 months ago and left her with nothing but debts and a ramshackle cabin 5 miles outside town. The merchant, Edgar Holloway, crossed his arms over his rounded belly and shook his head again. "I told you, Mrs. Kendrick, I cannot extend credit to a woman without a husband. It is not personal, you understand, but business. A woman alone has no means of guaranteeing payment." Adelaide's hands trembled as she clutched her small list of necessities: flour, sugar, coffee, lamp oil. She had come into town with the last of her egg money, but it was not enough for everything she needed to get through the next 2 weeks. She had hoped, just this once, that Mr. Holloway might show some mercy. Her garden was producing well, but she still needed basic supplies to survive the coming months. "I have been making my payments," Adelaide said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Every month since Thomas passed, I have paid what I owe. I am only asking for a small extension until I can sell more eggs and preserve some vegetables to bring in." "That may be so," Holloway said, his tone condescending, "but policy is policy. Without a man to vouch for you, I cannot take the risk." The other customers whispered among themselves, and Adelaide felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. She refused to cry in front of these people who had watched her fall from modest respectability to desperate poverty in less than a year. Thomas had been a gambler and a drinker, though she had not known the extent of his vices until after his death revealed debts she had never imagined existed. "I understand," she whispered, turning toward the door. She would make do with what little she had. She always did. The door swung open before she reached it, and Adelaide nearly collided with the largest man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the entire doorway. His chest strained against a worn leather vest, and his arms were thick with muscle that spoke of years of hard labor in the mountains. Long, dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a leather cord, and his jaw was covered with several days' worth of beard growth. His eyes, a striking gray blue, met hers for a brief moment before he stepped aside to let her pass. "Pardon me, madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through her chest. Adelaide nodded and tried to slip past him, but her vision had blurred with unshed tears, and she stumbled on the threshold. The mountain man's hand shot out, catching her elbow with surprising gentleness for someone so large. His grip steadied her instantly. "You all right?" he asked, concern evident in his rough features. "Yes, thank you," Adelaide managed, pulling free and hurrying out into the bright afternoon sunlight. She did not look back. Inside the mercantile, Tobias Vaughn watched the woman rush away before turning his attention to the store. He had come down from his cabin in the high country for supplies, his twice-yearly trip to civilization. He preferred the solitude of the mountains, but even he needed flour, ammunition, and other staples he could not produce himself. "Afternoon, Holloway," Tobias said, approaching the counter with his mental list of needs. "Mr. Vaughn, good to see you again. Been 6 months since your last visit? About that." Tobias glanced back at the door. "What was that about?" Holloway waved a dismissive hand. "The Kendrick woman. Widow. Husband died owing half the town money, and she has been struggling ever since. Wanted credit, but you know I cannot extend that to a woman alone. Too much risk." Tobias frowned. He had been living in these mountains for 8 years, ever since he had left behind a life back east that held nothing but painful memories. He had learned to read people in those years, and that woman had not looked like someone trying to take advantage. She had looked desperate and humiliated. "She have a history of not paying?" Tobias asked. "Well, no," Holloway admitted. "She has been making small payments on her late husband's debts, but that is beside the point. Policy is policy." Tobias pulled out his list and began gathering items from the shelves. He was a man of few words, preferring action to empty conversation, but something about the woman's face stuck in his mind. There had been a determination in her eyes beneath the shame, a strength that reminded him of the mountain springs that flowed cold and clear, even in the hottest summers. He loaded his supplies onto the counter and watched Holloway tally the costs. "What did she need?" Holloway looked up, surprised. "I beg your pardon, the woman. What supplies was she asking for?" "Oh, well, just the basics. Flour, sugar, coffee, lamp oil, nothing extravagant." Holloway quoted the total for Tobias's goods, and Tobias counted out the payment in gold coins. "Add her items to my order," Tobias said, placing extra coins on the counter. "And open an account in both our names." Holloway's eyes widened. "Mr. Vaughn, I do not think you understand. Mrs. Kendrick is a stranger to you. If she does not pay, you will be responsible for the debt." "I understand fine. Open the account." "But sir, you do not even know this woman. She could take advantage of your generosity." Tobias fixed the merchant with a steady gaze that made Holloway take a step back. "I said open the account, in both our names, Tobias Vaughn and Adelaide Kendrick. Whatever she needs, you provide it, and I will guarantee payment." Holloway swallowed hard. Tobias Vaughn was known throughout the territory as a man who kept his word and did not tolerate fools. He was also known for his temper when provoked, though he was generally peaceable. "As you wish, Mr. Vaughn. I will prepare the paperwork." While Holloway scratched out the account details in his ledger, Tobias gathered the additional supplies. He had no idea what possessed him to do this for a complete stranger, but he could not shake the image of her trembling hands and proud bearing. He had seen too many people broken by this harsh land, and something in him rebelled against watching another person crumble. "Where does she live?" Tobias asked as he loaded the supplies into a crate. "The old Kendrick place, about 5 miles northeast of town. Follow the main road and take the split toward Copper Canyon. You will see a cabin set back from the road, needs a fair bit of repair." Holloway handed him the paperwork. "Here is the account information." "Are you certain about this, Mr. Vaughn?" Tobias took the papers and folded them carefully. "Is she an honest woman?" "As far as I know, yes. Her husband was the problem, not her." "Then I am certain." Tobias hefted the crate easily, his powerful arms making the heavy load look weightless. "I will deliver these to her." He loaded everything into his wagon and climbed onto the seat. His 2 horses, sturdy mountain-bred animals, started forward at his command. The ride out of Silver Reef took him past the scattering of buildings that made up the small mining town. Silver Reef had boomed in the last few years, as miners discovered silver deposits in the sandstone, an unusual geological occurrence that had brought hundreds of fortune seekers to this remote corner of Utah territory. Tobias had no interest in silver. He trapped and hunted, selling pelts and meat to supplement what he could grow and forage. It was a hard life, but honest, and it suited him. He had no use for the company of others most of the time, content with his own thoughts and the vast silence of the wilderness. But something about Adelaide Kendrick had stirred something in him he thought long dead. The cabin came into view after about 40 minutes of travel. Holloway had not exaggerated about its condition. The roof sagged in one corner, and the fence around the small garden was more gaps than posts. But the garden itself was well tended, with neat rows of vegetables growing in the red Utah soil. Chickens scratched in a pen near the house, and he could see a milk cow in a small pasture behind the cabin. She was making the best of what she had. He could see that much. Adelaide was at the well, drawing water when his wagon approached. She straightened, pushing a strand of honey-colored hair from her face, and he saw her expression shift from surprise to confusion to mortification as he pulled up in front of her cabin. "Mr. Vaughn," she said, setting down the water bucket. "I do not understand. What are you doing here?" Tobias climbed down from the wagon. In the full sunlight, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably not yet 30. Her face was thin, worn by hardship, but pretty in a delicate way that seemed at odds with the harsh landscape. Her dress was faded and patched in several places, but clean. She wore it with dignity. "Brought your supplies, Mrs. Kendrick," he said, moving to the back of the wagon. "My supplies." "But I did not purchase anything I could not afford." Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. "No, no, I cannot accept charity, Mr. Vaughn. I appreciate the gesture, but I will not be an object of pity." "Not charity," Tobias said, lifting the crate. "Where do you want these?" Adelaide moved to block the cabin door, her chin raised stubbornly. For a small woman, she had considerable presence when her pride was engaged. "Mr. Vaughn, please. I cannot take these things without paying for them." "You will pay for them," Tobias said calmly. "I opened an account at Holloway's store in both our names. You can purchase what you need on credit, and you will make payments against the account as you are able. Same as you have been doing with your late husband's debts, from what I understand." Her hazel eyes widened. "You did what?" "But why would you do such a thing for a stranger?" "Because Holloway was being a fool and you needed help." Tobias adjusted the heavy crate. "Now, are you going to let me put this down, or are we going to stand here debating while my arms get tired?" Despite her distress, a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Somehow I doubt your arms tire easily, Mr. Vaughn," he almost smiled back. "Maybe not, but the sun is hot." She stepped aside and he carried the crate into the cabin. The interior was as neat as the garden, every surface scrubbed clean, but the poverty was evident. The furniture was sparse and worn, the shelves nearly bare. A small table held a vase with wildflowers, a touch of beauty in the stark room. He set the crate on the table and turned to find her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "I do not know what to say," Adelaide said softly. "This is more kindness than anyone has shown me since Thomas died. People in this town treat you poorly." She looked away. "They are not unkind exactly. But a woman alone with debts and no prospects becomes invisible, or worse, an object of pity and gossip. Thomas left me in a difficult position." Tobias heard the careful neutrality in her voice when she spoke of her late husband. "He was not good to you." It was not a question, and she did not treat it as one. "He was weak. I did not realize how weak until after he was gone. The gambling debts, the money borrowed and never repaid, the promises made and broken. I have been paying for his mistakes ever since." "That is not right." "No," she agreed quietly. "But it is the reality I face, which is why I cannot accept such generosity from a stranger, Mr. Vaughn. If word gets out that I have taken assistance from a mountain man no less, the gossip will be even worse than it already is." Tobias had not considered that angle. He was used to the frontier, where people helped one another survive and thought nothing of it, but he was not naive about the ways of small towns and their tendency to judge women more harshly than men. "Then let them think what they want," he said. "You need supplies to survive. That is more important than gossip. Easy for you to say. You can retreat to your mountain and leave the whispers behind. I have to live here." She had a point. Tobias ran a hand through his hair, considering, "What if we made it legitimate? I beg your pardon." "The account. What if we made it a business arrangement? You are clearly a hard worker. Your garden is thriving and you have chickens and a cow. What if you supplied me with goods in exchange for the credit? Eggs, vegetables, preserves. I come to town twice a year, but I could make more frequent trips to pick up supplies from you. Adelaide stared at him. You would ride 5 miles out of your way just to give me a way to pay you back with dignity. I would ride 5 miles to get fresh eggs and vegetables, Tobias corrected. Living in the mountains, I eat a lot of dried meat and potatoes. Fresh food would be welcome. She studied his face, searching for deception or pity, but Tobias kept his expression neutral. He meant what he said. Fresh vegetables and eggs would improve his diet considerably, and if it gave her a way to accept help without feeling like a charity case, all the better. All right, she said finally, but I insist on keeping careful records. I will not have anyone saying I took advantage of your generosity. Agreed. Tobias pulled the account papers from his pocket. This is the paperwork from Holloway. You can purchase on credit up to a reasonable amount each month. I will settle the full account with him twice a year, and you will repay me through trade and whatever payments you can manage. Adelaide took the papers with trembling fingers. I do not understand why you are doing this. Maybe I do not like seeing stubborn fools deny supplies to people who need them just because of arbitrary rules, Tobias said. Or maybe I just wanted to help. Does it matter? I suppose not. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he had seen her in the mercantile, she smiled genuinely. It transformed her entire face, chasing away the weariness and revealing the woman she must have been before hardship marked her. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, truly. I will repay every cent, I swear it. I know you will. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your roof needs work, and that fence is falling apart. I know, Adelaide said, a hint of defensiveness creeping back into her voice. I have been trying to repair what I can, but there is only so much I can do alone. I will come by next week and fix them. Mr. Vaughn, you have already done too much. Call me Tobias, he said, and I will be coming this way anyway to pick up eggs. Might as well make myself useful while I am here. Before she could protest further, he was out the door and climbing back onto his wagon. He could feel her eyes on him as he drove away, but he did not look back. He had learned long ago not to examine his impulses too closely. Some things you just did because they felt right, and helping Adelaide Kendrick felt right in a way he had not experienced in years. The week passed slowly for Adelaide. She worked her garden, tended her animals, and tried not to think too much about the tall mountain man who had inserted himself into her life like an unexpected storm. She had been alone for so long, handling everything herself, that accepting help felt strange and uncomfortable. But she could not deny the relief she felt when she unpacked the supplies he had brought. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute she had been making do with. Flour white and fine, not the coarse mixture she had been stretching. Sugar, lamp oil, even a small bag of peppermint candies that made her eyes sting with unexpected emotion. When had anyone last thought to bring her something sweet? She threw herself into work, determined to have enough goods ready when Tobias returned. She gathered every egg her hens produced, storing them carefully in the cool cellar. She harvested the early vegetables and prepared a basket of her best produce. She even made a batch of blackberry preserves from the wild berries growing along the creek that ran through her property. True to his word, Tobias returned the following week. Adelaide heard his wagon before she saw it and found herself checking her reflection in the small mirror by the door, tucking stray hairs back into her bun and smoothing her dress. She told herself it was simple propriety, not vanity, but her racing heart suggested otherwise. He brought lumber and tools, and before she could even offer him water, he was examining her roof with a critical eye. "Worse than I thought," he called down. This whole corner section needs replacing, not just patching. I cannot afford new lumber, Adelaide said, shading her eyes to look up at him. He moved with surprising agility for such a large man, balancing on the sloped roof as easily as walking on flat ground. Already bought, Tobias said. Consider it part of the account. Tobias, this is too much. He climbed down the ladder and faced her. Up close in the bright morning sun, she could see the details she had missed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting against sun and snow, the rough calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. Adelaide, he said, using her first name for the first time, your roof is going to collapse in the next big storm. That is not a matter of pride or charity. It is a matter of basic shelter. Would you rather wait until it caves in while you are sleeping? She wanted to argue, but he was right. She had been patching and repatching the weak spot for months, knowing it was a temporary solution at best. No, she admitted quietly. Then let me fix it. You can pay me back with preserves for the next 5 years if it makes you feel better. Despite herself, she laughed. It might take that long. He almost smiled. Then we have an arrangement. Tobias worked through the morning, tearing off the damaged section and replacing it with fresh lumber. Adelaide brought him water and watched him work, fascinated by the easy strength with which he handled the heavy beams. His muscles flexed beneath his shirt as he hammered and lifted, and she found herself staring more than once before catching herself and looking away, heat rising to her cheeks. It had been so long since she had felt anything like attraction. Thomas had killed whatever affection she might have had for him long before his death. But watching Tobias work, seeing the care he took with each nail and board, she felt something stirring inside her that she had thought dead. At noon, she insisted he come inside for a meal. You cannot work all day without eating, she said firmly. And I make a good stew. The cabin was small, and Tobias seemed to fill the entire space when he ducked through the doorway. He had to mind his head on the low ceiling beams, and when he sat at her small table, his knees barely fit underneath. But he did not complain, just removed his hat and waited politely while she served the food. "This is good," he said after the first bite, and she could tell he meant it. "Thank you. I have learned to make much from little." She sat across from him, pleased by his appreciation. "Where did you learn carpentry?" "My father was a builder back in Pennsylvania. I grew up on job sites learning the trade." His expression darkened slightly. "Seems like another lifetime now. What brought you out here?" For a moment she thought he would not answer. He focused on his stew, and she began to regret asking such a personal question. But then he spoke, his voice low. "My wife and daughter died of fever 8 years ago. Winter of '68. I could not stay in that place after they were gone, surrounded by memories, so I came west, kept going until I found somewhere remote enough that I could forget." Adelaide's heart clenched. "I am so sorry. I should not have pried." "It is all right. It was a long time ago." He met her eyes. "I do not talk about it much, but I do not mind you knowing. You have lost too. You understand." She did understand, though her loss was different. She had not mourned Thomas so much as mourned the life she thought she would have, the dreams that died with his poor choices. "Sometimes I think it would have been easier if I had loved him when he died," she admitted. "Then at least the grief would be clean. Instead, I just feel angry and cheated." "You have a right to feel that way." "Do I? Is it wrong to be angry at a dead man?" "Not if he earned it while he was living." Tobias finished his stew and pushed the bowl back. "My wife, Mary, she was a good woman. Kind, patient, strong. When she died, I wanted to die too. But then I got angry. Angry at God, at fate, at myself for not being able to save them. That anger kept me moving when grief would have stopped me. So no, I do not think it is wrong to be angry." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two wounded people recognizing kinship and shared pain. Then Tobias stood. "I should get back to work. Want to finish the roof before dark." He did finish, working steadily through the afternoon until the last board was nailed in place and the roof was solid and secure. Adelaide watched the sun sink toward the horizon and realized this was the first time in months she felt safe in her own home. When Tobias climbed down for the last time, she had his payment ready. A basket of eggs, fresh vegetables, and 2 jars of blackberry preserves. "It is not much," she said, "but it is a start." Tobias took the basket and examined the contents with genuine appreciation. "This is more than fair. The preserves alone are worth the trip." He loaded the basket into his wagon and turned back to her. "I will be back in 2 weeks to work on that fence. Tobias, you have already done so much. Fence is a hazard. Your cow could wander off or predators could get to your chickens. 2 weeks." He climbed onto the wagon seat and tipped his hat to her. "Take care of yourself, Adelaide." She watched him drive away until the dust settled and the evening silence returned. The cabin felt different now, more solid, safer, but it also felt emptier than before. Over the next 2 months, Tobias became a regular presence at the Kendrick cabin. He fixed the fence, reinforced the chicken coop, and repaired the well cover. He never stayed long, never presumed anything beyond their business arrangement, but each visit felt less like a transaction and more like something Adelaide could not quite name. She found herself looking forward to his arrival, preparing special foods she thought he might enjoy, making sure her cabin was spotless and her dress was clean. She told herself it was simple courtesy, but her heart knew better. Tobias felt the pull too, though he fought against it. He had sworn after Mary's death that he would never open his heart again, never risk that kind of pain. But Adelaide had slipped past his defenses without even trying. Her strength, her determination, her quiet dignity in the face of hardship called to something deep inside him. He found excuses to visit more often, picking up eggs twice a week instead of every 2 weeks, stopping by to check on repairs that did not need checking, bringing gifts disguised as trade goods, a warm shawl he claimed he had no use for, a book he said he had already read, seeds for her garden he pretended to have extra of. Adelaide accepted these gifts with knowing eyes, but said nothing. She simply thanked him and offered him coffee, and they would sit on her small porch and talk as the sun set over the red rock country. It was during one of these evening conversations in late October that everything changed. "Winter is coming early this year," Tobias said, watching the clouds gather over the mountains. "I can feel it in the air, going to be a hard one." Adelaide wrapped her shawl, the one he had given her, more tightly around her shoulders. "I know. I have been preparing as best I can." "You have enough firewood?" "Some. Probably not enough for a hard winter, but I will manage." Tobias frowned. The cabin had only a small fireplace and he had seen her woodpile. It would not last through January, let alone a full winter. "I will bring you more." "Tobias, Adelaide, do not argue. If you freeze to death, who will supply me with preserves?" He said it lightly, but they both knew he was serious. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. "Why do you care so much, really?" It was the question he had been avoiding for months. He could give her another easy answer, another deflection, but sitting here with her in the gathering darkness, he found he could not lie. "Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a stranger I was helping and became someone I care about." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Adelaide's breath caught. "Tobias." "I know it is not proper," he continued, the words coming faster now that he had started. "I know people will talk, and I know you have been hurt before, but I cannot keep pretending I am just here for the eggs and vegetables. I look forward to seeing you. I think about you when I am up in the mountains. I worry about you being alone out here with winter coming." "I think about you too," Adelaide whispered. "More than I should. More than I ever thought I would think about anyone again after Thomas." Tobias stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt before her, bringing them to eye level, his large hands gentle as they took hers. "I am not Thomas. I will never be Thomas. I do not gamble, I do not drink beyond moderation, and I keep my word. If I make a promise, I keep it. And I promise you, Adelaide, if you give me a chance, I will never give you reason to doubt me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am broken, Tobias. Thomas broke something in me, and I do not know if it can be fixed." "You are not broken," he said fiercely. "You are bent, maybe, dented, but not broken. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You have survived things that would have destroyed a weaker person, and you have done it with grace and dignity." "I am afraid," she admitted, "afraid to trust again, afraid to hope." "I am afraid too," Tobias said. "I lost everything once. Opening my heart again terrifies me. But I would rather be afraid and alive than safe and empty." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Tell me to go, and I will. I will still help you through the winter, still make sure you are safe, but I will not speak of this again. But if there is any chance you feel what I feel, tell me now." Adelaide looked into his gray-blue eyes and saw everything she had been afraid to hope for: strength, honesty, kindness, and something deeper. Something that made her heart race and her breath quicken. Something she had given up on ever finding. "I feel it," she said. "God help me, I feel it too." Tobias cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But Adelaide leaned into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, and the kiss deepened. It was nothing like the perfunctory affection Thomas had shown her. This was warmth and promise and a hunger that had been denied too long. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly. I want to do this right. People will talk. Let them. I do not care what anyone in Silver Reef thinks. Do you?" Adelaide considered. A month ago she would have cared desperately. But Tobias had shown her that her worth was not determined by town gossip or arbitrary social rules. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I do not care. Then I will be here every week. I will bring firewood and supplies, and I will court you like you deserve to be courted. And when enough time has passed that it is proper, I will ask you to marry me." "You are very confident," Adelaide said, a smile playing at her lips. "I am determined," Tobias corrected. "There is a difference." He stood and helped her to her feet. "I should go. It is a long ride back, and I do not want to compromise your reputation more than I already have. Will you really come back next week? Every week until the snow makes the roads impassable. And then I will come anyway, on snowshoes if I have to." She walked him to his wagon, and he kissed her once more before climbing onto the seat. "Lock your doors tonight," he said, "and every night. I will be safe on the road, always am." He snapped the reins, and the horses started forward. Adelaide stood watching until the wagon disappeared into the darkness. Her fingers pressed to her lips where she could still feel the warmth of his kiss. True to his word, Tobias came every week. He brought firewood, stacking it neatly beside her cabin until she had more than enough for the winter. He brought supplies purchased on their joint account, always careful to document everything so she could track her debts. And he brought himself, spending hours talking with her, learning her thoughts and dreams, sharing his own. The gossip in Silver Reef reached a fever pitch. The mountain man and the widow, people whispered. What could he possibly want with her? Was it proper for them to be alone together so often? Adelaide heard the whispers when she came to town for supplies, but she held her head high and ignored them. Holloway, to his credit, had become a supporter of sorts. "Mrs. Kendrick's account is in excellent standing," he told anyone who asked. "She has never missed a payment. Whatever arrangement she has with Mr. Vaughn is clearly working." November brought the first snow, dusting the red rocks with white and turning the high country into an impassable fortress of ice. Tobias came down from the mountains and spent a week in Silver Reef, taking a room at the boarding house but spending every day at Adelaide's cabin. "I do not like leaving you alone out here," he said one afternoon as they sat before her fire. "If something happened, if you got hurt or sick, no one would know." "I have managed alone for months," Adelaide reminded him. "I will be fine. I know you will. But that does not mean I have to like it." He took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "Move to town for the winter. Take a room at the boarding house. It would be safer." "I cannot afford that." "I can. Tobias Vaughn, we have talked about this." "I will not be kept by any man, not even you." He sighed but smiled. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "Good. You need someone stubborn if you plan to marry me." The words were out before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks burn. "I mean, if that is still what you intend." "It is exactly what I intend," Tobias said, pulling her close. "I was going to wait until spring to ask, but if you are ready now—" "I did not say I was ready," Adelaide protested, but she was smiling. "I said if you plan to ask." "I plan to ask," Tobias assured her. "When the time is right, when you are certain." "I am already certain," Adelaide admitted. "I have been certain since that first kiss, but I want to do this properly too. I want to have paid down more of my debt. I want to stand beside you as an equal partner, not as someone you had to rescue." "You have never been someone I had to rescue," Tobias said firmly. "You were saving yourself just fine before I came along. I just made it a little easier." December brought heavy snows that closed the road for weeks at a time. Tobias made it out to Adelaide's cabin whenever there was a break in the weather, but there were long stretches when travel was impossible. Those were the hardest times for both of them, separated by miles of snow and ice, worrying about each other. Adelaide spent those lonely weeks working on projects to pass the time. She knitted Tobias a heavy scarf from yarn she had bartered for with eggs. She preserved every bit of food she could, preparing for the lean months of late winter. And she wrote in a journal, documenting her thoughts and feelings, working through her fears about committing to another marriage. Thomas had made her wary, but Tobias was nothing like Thomas. Every action, every word, every gesture proved that. Where Thomas had been weak and selfish, Tobias was strong and generous. Where Thomas had lied, Tobias was honest to a fault. Where Thomas had taken, Tobias gave. She was ready, she realized one snowy evening as she sat alone by her fire. She was ready to take the risk, to open her heart fully, to trust that Tobias would keep his promises. When Tobias finally made it through the snow in mid-January, Adelaide met him at the door with tears streaming down her face. He dropped the load of firewood he was carrying and pulled her into his arms, panic clear in his voice. "What is wrong? Are you hurt? Are you sick?" "No," Adelaide said, laughing through her tears. "I am happy, so happy to see you. I missed you so much." Relief flooded through him and he held her tight. "I missed you too, every day. I hated being stuck in town, knowing you were out here alone." They went inside, and Adelaide made coffee while Tobias shook the snow from his coat. When they were settled by the fire, she handed him a wrapped package. "I made you something." He opened it carefully and pulled out the scarf, his face softening. "Adelaide, this is beautiful, thank you. Try it on." He wrapped the scarf around his neck and she nodded approvingly. "Perfect. It matches your eyes." "I have something for you too," Tobias said. He pulled a small carved box from his pocket and handed it to her. "I made this during the weeks I was snowed in." Adelaide opened the box and gasped. Inside was a delicate wooden bird, carved with incredible detail. Every feather was visible, every curve of the wing perfectly rendered. "Tobias, this is exquisite. I had no idea you could carve like this. My father taught me when I was young. I have not done it in years, but I wanted to make you something special." He took her hand. "The bird is a mountain bluebird. They are the first sign of spring in the high country. A symbol of hope and new beginnings." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears again. "I love it. I will treasure it always." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire and holding hands. Finally, Adelaide spoke. "I have been thinking a lot these past weeks, about us, about the future. And I do not want to wait until spring. I do not want to wait at all." Tobias turned to face her fully. "What are you saying?" "I am saying yes. To whatever you are going to ask me when the time is right. I am saying yes now." A slow smile spread across Tobias's face. "Adelaide Kendrick, are you proposing to me?" "I believe I am," Adelaide said, feeling suddenly bold. "Someone has to take charge, and you said you were waiting for the right time. Well, this is the right time. I love you, Tobias Vaughn. I love your strength and your kindness and your terrible habit of fixing things I did not ask you to fix. I love the way you look at me like I am precious. I love that you make me feel safe and valued and beautiful. So yes, I am proposing to you. Will you marry me?" Tobias laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled the small cabin. Then he dropped to one knee before her, his large hands taking hers. "Adelaide, I would be honored to marry you, but let me do this properly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I have been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Seems you beat me to it, but I am going to ask anyway. Adelaide Kendrick, will you be my wife? Will you come with me to the mountains and build a life together? Will you let me love you and protect you and stand beside you for whatever time we are given?" "Yes," Adelaide said, tears streaming freely now. "Yes to all of it." Tobias slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and promise they had been holding back for months. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. "When?" Tobias asked. "How soon can we make this official?" "As soon as possible. I do not want to wait any longer than we have to. The circuit preacher comes through Silver Reef in February. We could marry then." "Perfect." Adelaide rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What will people say?" "That the mountain man and the widow are getting married. Let them say whatever they want. I have you, and that is all that matters." They were married on a cold February morning in the small church in Silver Reef. Adelaide wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Tobias wore his best shirt and vest. Holloway stood as witness, along with the boarding house proprietor, Mrs. Morrison, who had befriended Adelaide in recent weeks. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Tobias kissed Adelaide with such tenderness that Mrs. Morrison wiped tears from her eyes. They signed the register, officially becoming Mr. and Mrs. Tobias Vaughn, and walked out of the church into the bright winter sunshine as a married couple. "How does it feel?" Tobias asked as they rode back to the cabin to gather Adelaide's belongings. "Right," Adelaide said simply. "It feels right." They spent one last night in Adelaide's cabin, making love for the first time as husband and wife. Tobias was patient and gentle, taking his time to learn what pleased her, washing away the memory of Thomas's selfish fumbling. Adelaide discovered that her body was capable of pleasure she had never imagined, and she fell asleep in Tobias's arms feeling cherished and whole. The next morning, they loaded Adelaide's few possessions into the wagon and set out for Tobias's cabin in the high country. The journey took 2 days, following narrow mountain trails through deep snow. Adelaide marveled at the wild beauty of the landscape, the towering pines heavy with snow, the eagles soaring overhead, the absolute silence broken only by the sound of the horses and the wind. When they finally arrived at Tobias's cabin, Adelaide was stunned. She had expected something rough and primitive, but what she found was a solid log structure with real windows, a large stone fireplace, and a loft sleeping area. The interior was sparse but well built, every piece of furniture made by Tobias's own hands. "It is wonderful," Adelaide said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It will be more wonderful once you make it a home," Tobias said, bringing in the last of her things. "I built this place for survival, but I want it to be more than that now. I want it to be somewhere we both want to be." Over the next weeks, Adelaide did exactly that. She hung curtains in the windows, placed her wildflower vases on the shelves, and organized the kitchen to her liking. She cooked proper meals and filled the cabin with wonderful smells that Tobias claimed were better than anything he had experienced in years of bachelor living. They settled into a rhythm of life that suited them both. Tobias ran his trap lines and hunted, while Adelaide tended the small animals he kept and worked on indoor projects during the winter months. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking and reading, or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape overnight. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion, and the meadows turned green almost before their eyes. Tobias took Adelaide exploring, showing her his favorite places. The hidden waterfall where he bathed in summer, the high meadow where elk gathered at dawn, the cliff edge where you could see for 100 miles on clear days. Adelaide fell in love with the mountains as deeply as she had fallen in love with Tobias. The wild freedom of it called to something in her soul she had not known existed. She was not trapped here. She was liberated. In May, they made the journey down to Silver Reef to settle accounts and purchase supplies. Tobias paid off the remaining balance on Adelaide's debts, erasing the last of Thomas's legacy. Then he closed the joint account at Holloway's store and opened a new one in just their married name. "You are free of him now," Tobias told Adelaide as they left the mercantile. "Free of his debts, free of his mistakes. Everything from here forward is ours together." Adelaide squeezed his hand, too moved to speak. She had never imagined she could feel this light, this unburdened, this hopeful about the future. They visited Adelaide's old cabin and found it in disrepair, the months of neglect showing. "Should we sell it?" Tobias asked. Adelaide considered. "No, let us keep it. Maybe someday we will need it, or maybe we can help someone else the way you helped me." "That is a fine idea," Tobias agreed. By summer, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, her missed courses and morning queasiness finally adding up to an unmistakable conclusion. She told Tobias one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I am with child," she said simply. Tobias went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "Are you certain as I can be without a doctor? But yes, I am certain." He was quiet for so long that Adelaide began to worry. Did he not want children? Had she made a mistake telling him? But then she saw the tears tracking down his cheeks and she understood. He was thinking of the daughter he lost, the family that had been taken from him. "Tobias," she said softly, taking his hand. "Talk to me." "I never thought I would have this again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A wife I love, a child on the way, a family. After Mary and our daughter died, I was certain that part of my life was over, and now here you are, giving me everything I thought I had lost forever. Are you happy about it?" Happy does not begin to cover it, Tobias said, pulling her close. I am terrified and overwhelmed and more grateful than I can express. You have given me my life back, Adelaide. You have given me a reason to hope again. They held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. We need to go down to Silver Reef, Adelaide said. I should see a doctor to make sure everything is all right. We will go tomorrow, Tobias said, and we are staying in town until after the baby comes. I am not taking any chances with you or our child. Adelaide started to protest, but Tobias silenced her with a kiss. This is not negotiable. I lost one family. I will not risk losing another. She heard the fear beneath his determination and relented. All right, we will stay in town. But we are coming back here after the baby is born. Agreed. They spent the next weeks preparing. Tobias built a cradle from smooth pine and carved delicate designs into the wood. Adelaide sewed baby clothes and blankets. They talked about names and nursed dreams of the future. In late August, they moved back to Adelaide's old cabin, which Tobias had spent weeks repairing and improving. It was closer to town and the doctor, safer for Adelaide's confinement. The cabin looked different now, solid and cared for, transformed from a place of hardship to a place of hope. Adelaide's pregnancy progressed normally, though she found the heat of late summer difficult. Tobias was attentive to the point of being overprotective, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a teacup. She found it endearing even when it frustrated her. In early October, as the aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, Adelaide went into labor. Tobias fetched the doctor and Mrs. Morrison to attend her, then spent the longest hours of his life pacing outside the cabin, while Adelaide labored inside. When the first cry pierced the air, Tobias nearly broke down the door getting inside. Mrs. Morrison met him with a smile. You have a son, Mr. Vaughn, a healthy, strong boy. Tobias crossed to the bed where Adelaide lay exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. She looked up at him with tired eyes full of love. We have a son. Tobias knelt beside the bed and gently touched the baby's face, marveling at the tiny perfection of him. Dark hair like his own, a nose that seemed to favor Adelaide's, and lungs that clearly worked just fine based on the volume of his cries. He is perfect, Tobias whispered. You are perfect. Thank you, Adelaide. Thank you for this gift. They named him Thomas John Vaughn, Thomas for Adelaide's late husband as a way of honoring the past while looking to the future, and John for Tobias's father. Young Thomas was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them both busy and exhausted, and happier than either had thought possible. Tobias proved to be a devoted father, rising with Adelaide for night feedings and changing nappies without complaint. He sang to Thomas in a rumbling bass that somehow always soothed the baby when he was fussy. He built a larger crib when Thomas outgrew the cradle and crafted toys with his skilled hands. When spring came, they returned to the mountain cabin with their son. Thomas thrived in the high country air, growing sturdy and strong. He took his first steps on the cabin floor, spoke his first words looking up at the tall pines, and learned to love the mountains as his parents did. 2 years later, Adelaide gave birth to a daughter they named Mary Grace, after Tobias's first wife and the grace they both felt had been granted them in finding each other. Mary had Adelaide's hazel eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her brother everywhere. Life in the mountains was hard work but deeply satisfying. They raised chickens and goats, kept a large garden in the summer, and Tobias taught both children to fish and track and read the signs of the forest. Adelaide taught them letters and numbers, and when they were old enough, she told them stories of how their father had saved her when she thought all hope was lost. "He gave me back my life," she told them. "He showed me that not all men are cruel and that love can heal even the deepest wounds." Thomas and Mary grew strong and capable, learning the ways of the wilderness while also understanding the value of kindness and integrity their parents exemplified. When Thomas was 10 and Mary was 8, Adelaide gave birth to another son, Samuel, giving them one more child to love and raise in their mountain home. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. Winters spent in the lowland cabin, where the children attended school in Silver Reef. Springs and summers and autumns in the high country, where they lived close to the land and each other. Tobias's hair turned gray at the temples, and Adelaide found lines forming at the corners of her eyes, but their love never dimmed. They made a good living from Tobias's trapping and Adelaide's preserves and baked goods, which became famous throughout the territory. People came from miles around to buy her blackberry jam and her sourdough bread. Holloway had long since become a friend, and he stocked her goods prominently in his store. Adelaide never forgot the day she had stood in that mercantile, humiliated and hopeless, or the mountain man who had stepped in and changed everything. Sometimes, when she watched Tobias playing with their children or felt his arms around her at night, she marveled at the turns life could take. Young, Thomas grew into a fine young man who became a logger in the nearby forests, using the skills his father had taught him. He married a sweet girl from Silver Reef named Catherine, and they gave Tobias and Adelaide their first grandchildren. Mary surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, determined to bring education to the rough mining towns springing up throughout the territory. Samuel followed his father into the mountains, taking over the trap lines when Tobias's knees finally made the hard travel too difficult. As Tobias and Adelaide grew older, they spent more time in the lowland cabin and less in the high country, though they visited often. Tobias built a wide porch where they could sit and watch the red rocks change color with the moving sun. They hosted Sunday dinners for their growing family, and the cabin that had once echoed with Adelaide's lonely footsteps now rang with the laughter of children and grandchildren. On their 20th anniversary, Adelaide woke to find Tobias already awake, watching her with the same intensity he had shown on their wedding day. "Good morning, my love," she said, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "Good morning," Tobias replied, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. 20 years. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been with me." "I was thinking about that day in the mercantile," Adelaide said. "How close I came to just giving up. If you had not walked through that door." "But I did," Tobias said firmly. "And you did not give up. You never gave up, Adelaide. That is what I love most about you, your strength." "You gave me reason to be strong," Adelaide countered. "You showed me what my life could be if I was willing to fight for it." "We fought for it together," Tobias said. He got out of bed and retrieved a package from his dresser. "I made you something." Adelaide sat up and opened the wrapping carefully. Inside was a carved wooden box, similar to the one he had given her that snowy January evening so many years ago. But this one was larger, more elaborate, with intricate designs covering every surface. She lifted the lid and gasped. Inside were dozens of carved birds, each one different. Mountain bluebirds and ravens, eagles and sparrows, owls and hawks. Every bird he had carved over their years together, collected and preserved in this beautiful box. "Each one represents a year," Tobias said. "A year of new beginnings, a year of hope, a year of love." Adelaide's eyes filled with tears as she examined each delicate carving. She could remember when many of them had been made. The eagle after Thomas was born, the raven after Mary came. The nesting pair after Samuel completed their family. Each bird was a memory, a milestone, a testament to the life they had built together. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Adelaide said. "Thank you, Tobias, for this, for everything, for 20 years of being the man I needed you to be. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough mountain man who did not know what he had until he found you standing in Holloway's store looking like the world had knocked you down one too many times." He pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made, opening that account in both our names." Adelaide laughed, remembering how shocked and uncertain she had been. "Best decision I ever made, accepting your help even though every part of me wanted to refuse." "We were both stubborn fools," Tobias said fondly. "We still are," Adelaide agreed. "But we are stubborn fools together, and that makes all the difference." They spent the day celebrating quietly, walking through Silver Reef and remembering their early days together. They visited the church where they had married and the mercantile where it all began. Holloway, now an old man himself, greeted them warmly and reminded them that he still had their original account paperwork in his files. "Historic document, that is," he said with a grin. "The day the mountain man decided to be a hero." "I was never a hero," Tobias protested. "I just did what was right." "That is what heroes do," Adelaide said, slipping her arm through his. "They do what is right even when it is not easy." That evening, their children and grandchildren gathered at the cabin for a feast Adelaide and Mary had prepared together. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, 3 generations celebrating the marriage that had started it all. As the sun set and the youngest grandchildren fell asleep in their parents' arms, Thomas raised a glass. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Thank you for choosing each other, and thank you for choosing us." Everyone raised their glasses, and Adelaide felt Tobias's hand find hers under the table, his fingers lacing through hers with the easy intimacy of 20 years of marriage. She squeezed back, her heart full to overflowing. Later, after everyone had gone home and they were alone again, Adelaide and Tobias sat on their porch watching the stars emerge one by one. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and juniper from the hills. "You ever miss the high country?" Adelaide asked. "Sometimes," Tobias admitted, "but home is wherever you are, if that is here in the lowlands or up in the mountains or in some town I have never heard of, it does not matter, as long as I am with you." "I feel the same way," Adelaide said. She rested her head on his shoulder, marveling at how comfortable they were together after all these years. No awkwardness, no uncertainty, just the deep peace of 2 people who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. "You have any regrets?" Tobias asked after a while. Adelaide considered the question seriously. Did she regret marrying Thomas and the hard years that followed? Did she regret the poverty and struggle and humiliation? "No," she said finally, "because all of it led me to you. If I had not been standing in that mercantile that day, desperate and alone, we might never have met. Every hard thing I went through was worth it for this. Even Thomas. He taught me what I did not want in a husband, which made me appreciate what I found in you all the more." Tobias pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you, Adelaide Vaughn. I have loved you from the moment you tried to refuse my help out of pure stubborn pride. I love you too, Tobias Vaughn. I have loved you from the moment you knelt in my cabin and promised to never give me reason to doubt you. And in 20 years, you never have." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life more beautiful than either had dared to dream. The mountains rose dark against the starlit sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song. But Adelaide was not lonely anymore, and neither was Tobias. They had found their home in each other, and that home had expanded to include children and grandchildren, and a legacy of love that would outlast them both. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythm of seasons and the milestones of their family's growth. More grandchildren came, and then great-grandchildren, filling their lives with joy and purpose. Adelaide's preserves became the stuff of legend in Silver Reef and beyond, and young women sought her out to learn her recipes and techniques. Tobias, though his body slowed with age, remained strong and vital, his presence still commanding respect wherever he went. When they were both in their 60s, the territory of Utah achieved statehood, and Silver Reef celebrated with a grand festival. The whole family gathered to mark the occasion, and the governor himself, visiting the small mining town, made a point of meeting the elderly couple whose love story had become local folklore. "I understand you two have quite a history," the governor said, shaking their hands. "We do," Tobias agreed. "Though it is a simple enough story, she needed help, I gave it, and we fell in love." "The best love stories are often the simplest," the governor said warmly. "Thank you for being an example of the pioneer spirit that built this great state." As they aged, Adelaide and Tobias found new ways to stay active and engaged. Adelaide wrote down all her recipes in a careful hand, creating a cookbook she passed on to her daughters and daughters-in-law. She also began writing the story of her life. From her difficult first marriage through the miraculous day Tobias entered her life, wanting future generations to know their history. Tobias continued to carve, his skilled hands creating ever more intricate and beautiful pieces. He carved a set of wooden animals for each grandchild and great-grandchild, and his work began to attract attention from collectors who traveled from as far as Salt Lake City to commission pieces. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by a family that now numbered in the dozens, Adelaide and Tobias renewed their vows in the same small church where they had first married. Adelaide wore a new dress made by Mary, and Tobias wore a suit his sons had insisted on buying for him. When they spoke their vows again, there was not a dry eye in the congregation. "I, Tobias, take you, Adelaide, to be my wife again and always," Tobias said, his voice strong despite his years. "You have given me 30 years of joy I never thought to have. You have blessed me with children and grandchildren, and a love that sustains me every day. I promise to love you for whatever time we have left, and to thank God every morning that I walked into Holloway's store on that August day in 1876. I, Adelaide, take you, Tobias, to be my husband again and always," Adelaide replied, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "You saved me when I was drowning. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that love could be kind and honest and true. I promise to love you until my last breath, and to be grateful every day for the man who saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself." The preacher, the grandson of the man who had married them originally, pronounced them husband and wife once more, and Tobias kissed Adelaide with all the passion of their youth, making their grandchildren giggle and their children smile with misty eyes. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than any gathering needed. Young children played in the churchyard while their parents visited, and the elderly couple at the center of it all sat in places of honor, watching their legacy unfold around them. "We did well," Adelaide said to Tobias as the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson. "We did," Tobias agreed, his arm around her shoulders. "Better than I ever hoped." As they entered their 70s, both began to slow more noticeably. Tobias's knees finally gave him constant trouble, and Adelaide's hands grew stiff with arthritis. but their minds remained sharp, and their love remained constant. They moved into a small house in Silver Reef, closer to family and medical care, though they still visited their mountain cabin every summer when the weather allowed. Samuel, now a man in his 40s with children of his own, maintained the mountain property and often brought his family up to stay there, keeping the place alive with the laughter of children, just as Tobias and Adelaide had done decades before. One spring morning, when Adelaide was 74 and Tobias 76, Adelaide woke to find Tobias had prepared breakfast for her, something he had been doing more often as her arthritis made cooking difficult. "You spoil me," she said, accepting the plate of eggs and toast. "After 52 years, I think I have earned the right," Tobias replied. "Besides, you spoiled me for 30 years before your hands started giving you trouble. I am just returning the favor." They had been married 52 years. Sometimes Adelaide could hardly believe it. More than half a century with this man, building a life from nothing, raising a family, growing old together. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible when she stood in Holloway's Mercantile, young and desperate and alone. "What are you thinking about?" Tobias asked, seeing the faraway look in her eyes. "About that day. The day everything changed." "I think about it too," Tobias admitted. "I wonder sometimes what my life would have been like if I had come to town a day earlier or later, if I had missed you." "We would have both survived," Adelaide said, "but I do not think we would have truly lived." "No," Tobias agreed. "I was just existing before I met you, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live again." "And you gave me hope," Adelaide said. "Hope that life could be good. That I deserved happiness. That love existed in forms I had never experienced." They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, then spent the morning working in their small garden. Adelaide could not do much with her stiff hands, but she enjoyed being outside, directing Tobias in the planting while she sat on a bench he had built for that purpose. In the afternoon, Mary visited with several of the grandchildren, bringing fresh bread and news of the family. Thomas was doing well with his logging operation. Samuel had just purchased additional land for his trapping operation. The various grandchildren were thriving in their own pursuits, some staying in Utah, others venturing farther afield in search of opportunities. "You and Papa built something special," Mary said to Adelaide while Tobias entertained the great-grandchildren with stories. "A whole family tree that all stems from that one act of kindness in a mercantile 52 years ago." "Your father would say it was not kindness but common sense," Adelaide said with a smile. "But I know better. It was courage, courage to see someone in need and help them, despite what people might say. Despite the risk. That is who your father is at his core, the bravest man I have ever known." "He would say the same about you," Mary said. "He tells anyone who will listen that you are the strongest person he has ever met." "We made each other strong," Adelaide said. "That is what love does when it is real. It does not diminish you. It amplifies the best parts of who you are." As summer turned to autumn in that 52nd year of their marriage, Tobias's health began to decline. The doctor diagnosed a weak heart, advising rest and limited activity. Tobias, never one to sit idle, chafed at the restrictions but obeyed for Adelaide's sake. "I am not ready to leave you yet," he told her one October evening as they sat watching the sunset. "We have more time coming to us." "We have had a lifetime," Adelaide said, though her heart broke at the thought of losing him. 52 beautiful years. If we have more, I will be grateful. But if this is our time to say goodbye, I want you to know that you made my life a joy, every single day." "Adelaide," Tobias said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am not giving up, I am just being realistic." "I know," she said, taking his hand, "and I will be by your side, whatever comes." just as you have been by mine for over half a century." But Tobias proved stronger than the doctor predicted. He adjusted to his limitations, taking life slower but still finding joy in small things. He carved less intricate pieces but continued the craft he loved. He told stories to his great-grandchildren and gave advice to his grandsons. He made sure Adelaide knew every day how much he loved her. Winter came, cold and fierce, and they stayed warm by their fire, reminiscing about their years together. They looked through Adelaide's journals and Tobias's carvings, a lifetime of memories preserved in wood and ink. "Do you remember the first time I kissed you?" Tobias asked one snowy evening. "Of course," Adelaide said. "On my porch, with the sun setting and my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint. I was terrified you would say no," Tobias admitted, "that you would tell me to leave and never come back." "I was terrified too," Adelaide said. "Terrified to hope that someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like me. I was a rough mountain man who barely knew how to talk to people." "You were a hero," Adelaide corrected. "My hero. And you still are." They made it through that winter and into another spring. On their 53rd anniversary, they renewed their vows once more in their small living room, surrounded by immediate family. It was a quiet ceremony, with Tobias sitting in his chair because standing for long periods tired him too much, but no less meaningful than their previous renewals. 53 years, Adelaide said when the short ceremony concluded. "More than I ever dreamed possible." "Best 53 years of my life," Tobias said. "Every minute of them." Summer brought warm days that Tobias spent sitting on the porch, watching the world go by. Adelaide sat with him, holding his hand, talking about everything and nothing. They discussed their children's accomplishments and their grandchildren's potential. They planned visits to the mountain cabin, though both knew Tobias was no longer strong enough for the journey. In late July, Tobias took a turn for the worse. The doctor was called and the family gathered, knowing the end was near. Adelaide refused to leave his side, sitting by his bed and holding his hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. "Adelaide," he whispered during a lucid moment, his voice weak but clear. "My beautiful Adelaide." "I am here," she said, leaning close so he could see her face. "I am right here, my love. Thank you," he said, "for saying yes, for taking a chance, for 53 years of happiness." "Thank you for asking," Adelaide replied, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for loving me so well." "Always," Tobias said. His eyes found hers, and she saw all the love and devotion of their long marriage reflected there. "Always and forever." Those were his last words. He closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully, his hand still clasped in Adelaide's, surrounded by the family they had created together. The funeral was held in the Silver Reef Church, and people came from throughout the territory to pay their respects. Tobias Vaughn had been well known and well loved, a man whose integrity and kindness had touched countless lives. But it was his love story with Adelaide that people remembered most. "He was a true hero," the preacher said during the eulogy. "Not because he fought in wars or conquered great obstacles, but because he saw someone in need and helped them, because he kept his promises, because he loved his wife and family with unwavering devotion. That is the kind of heroism we should all aspire to." Adelaide sat in the front row, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and listened to the words wash over her. She grieved deeply, the loss of her partner cutting to the core of her being. But beneath the grief was gratitude. Gratitude for 53 years of love. Gratitude for a man who had changed her life with one simple act of kindness. Gratitude for a full, rich life that had exceeded her wildest dreams. After the funeral, the family gathered at Adelaide's house. Young Thomas placed the box of carved birds on the mantel, where it could be seen and remembered. Mary brought food and made sure her mother ate something. Samuel sat with Adelaide and told her stories about his father, making her laugh through her tears. "He lived a good life," Samuel said. "And he died knowing he was loved. That is all any of us can hope for." "He gave me a good life," Adelaide said. "I will be forever grateful for that." In the months that followed, Adelaide adjusted to life without Tobias. It was harder than she expected after so many years of partnership. The house felt empty without his presence, the silence oppressive. But she was not truly alone. Her family visited daily, making sure she ate and slept and did not sink too deeply into her grief. She began reading through her journals again, reliving their life together through the words she had written over the decades. She looked at Tobias's carvings and remembered the stories behind each one. She wore his mother's ring and the scarf she had knitted him all those years ago, tangible connections to the man she had loved. On what would have been their 54th anniversary, the entire family gathered at Adelaide's house for a celebration of Tobias's life. They shared stories and memories, laughed and cried, and honored the man who had been the foundation of their family. "I want to tell you something," Adelaide said when everyone had gathered, "something I have never said publicly before." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I met your father, I was broken. Not just poor or struggling, but truly broken inside. Thomas, my first husband, had destroyed my faith in love, in men, in myself. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, just surviving day to day." She looked around at the faces of her family, so many lives that would not exist if not for one act of kindness. Then this mountain man walked into Holloway's store and changed everything. He did not save me, not really. What he did was show me I was worth saving. He gave me the tools and the support to save myself, and in doing so, he gave me a reason to live again. Her voice broke, but she continued. "He loved me well. For 53 years, he loved me well. He was patient with my fears and proud of my strengths. He built me up when I doubted myself and stood beside me when I needed support. He gave me 3 beautiful children and showed me what it meant to be truly partnered with someone." She touched the carved bird box on the mantel. "He gave me hope when I had none. And he taught all of you, through his example, how to love with integrity and honor. That is his legacy. Not the furs he trapped or the wood he carved, but the love he showed and the lives he touched. Remember that. Remember him." There was not a dry eye in the room when she finished. Young Thomas stood and raised his glass. "To Tobias Vaughn, mountain man, father, grandfather, husband, and hero, may we all love as well as he did." "To Tobias," everyone echoed. Adelaide lived for 3 more years after Tobias's death, years filled with her family and memories of the life they had built together. She finished writing her story, leaving behind a detailed account of her life for future generations. She spent time with her great-great-grandchildren, the newest additions to the family tree that had started with a simple act of kindness in a mercantile. On a warm summer evening, surrounded by family in the house she had shared with Tobias, Adelaide slipped away peacefully in her sleep. She was 80 years old, and she died as she had lived the last 56 years of her life, loved and cherished by everyone who knew her. They buried her next to Tobias on a hillside overlooking Silver Reef, under the vast Utah sky they had both loved. On her gravestone, her children inscribed the words she had written in her journal: Adelaide Kendrick Vaughn, 1848–1928. She was refused credit because she was alone. A mountain man opened an account in both their names, and together they built a love that lasted a lifetime. Years later, Adelaide's great-great-granddaughter, doing research for a school project, discovered the original account paperwork in the historical archives of what had once been Holloway's Mercantile. The faded document showed two names, Tobias Vaughn and Adelaide Kendrick, along with a note in Holloway's handwriting. Account opened August 15, 1876. Guaranteed by T. Vaughn, one of the most solid accounts I ever maintained. She shared her discovery with the family, and they marveled at this tangible piece of their history. That simple piece of paper represented the moment everything changed, when two people who should have been strangers became partners, and eventually became the foundation of a family that now numbered in the hundreds. The mountain cabin still stood, maintained now by the sixth generation of Vaughns, who brought their children there every summer to experience the wild beauty their ancestors had loved. The lowland house in Silver Reef had been turned into a small museum celebrating the pioneering spirit of early Utah settlers, with Tobias and Adelaide's story featured prominently. But their true legacy was not in buildings or documents. It was in the values they had instilled in their descendants. Kindness to strangers, integrity in all dealings, the courage to help when help was needed, the belief that love, real love, was worth fighting for and could heal even the deepest wounds. And somewhere in the high country, where the pines grew tall and the eagles soared over snow-capped peaks, the mountain bluebirds still returned every spring, symbols of hope and new beginnings, just as they had been for two people who found each other when they needed each other most, and built a love story that would be remembered for generations. The merchant had refused her credit because she was alone. The mountain man had opened an account in both their names. And from that simple act of compassion grew a love that defied the odds, transcended hardship, and proved that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is open their heart and give someone hope when they need it most. Their story became legend in Silver Reef and beyond, a reminder that heroism comes in many forms and that love, when it is true and honest and committed, can transform lives and create legacies that last far beyond one lifetime. And so the tale ended not with sadness but with celebration. Two lives joined in love, three children raised with care, generations of descendants living lives of purpose and integrity, and a community forever changed by the example of one mountain man who saw a woman in need and chose kindness over indifference, compassion over judgment, and love over loneliness. It was a good ending to a good life, and both Tobias and Adelaide would have been pleased to know that their story continued to inspire long after they were gone, a testament to the enduring power of love and the simple truth that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to help when help is needed most.